Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Robert Joslin, Managing Director with Avasant, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. So I'll real quick have the panel introduce themselves.
So I'm Gary Ahwah. I'm from Molina Healthcare. Molina Healthcare is a $30 billion company providing the health insurance for mostly about 5 million members of in Medicaid.
And good afternoon. My name is Zunker. I sound so loud. And I'm a Senior Managing Director with Accenture. And I spend my time in the healthcare space, both payer and provider, and I have responsibility for some of our largest accounts, both from a relationship perspective as well as a delivery perspective. So.
And hi, everyone. I'm Howard Miller. I'm the Chief Information Officer at UCLA Anderson School of Management. I've been with UCLA for a little over 3 years, and I've spent the last 10 years of my career in higher education.
So today we're going to basically have some questions. I'll feed some questions to the panel. It's going to be pretty dynamic and pretty interactive. But real quick, 2.5 years ago, organizations had already started moving substantially down the path toward digital adoption and at a variety of paces. And based on their financial situation, their industry, regulatory requirements, was constraining that a little bit, but is really starting to open up and move quite a bit. Then COVID hit, and during COVID, some projects were paused, some projects were shut down, and some projects were accelerated, and projects that we didn't even know about popped up all of a sudden, and digital transformation was used to actually help us solve those. So what we want to talk about today is some of the changes that we're either seeing and some of the learnings that occurred and how people address that, because what we've discovered is digital transformation can be very instrumental in helping add additional value to the business growth, top-line growth in some situations. And we want to understand that and explore that a little bit more to understand how those changes occurred, what those learnings were. So I think first off, I'll start off with a question. It's just going to be kind of a general question to whoever wants to take it first. But how have you seen IT evolve to support the ability of businesses to grow through digital transformation?
Ladies first, or left to right? Go ahead.
I would say from an evolution standpoint, we have certainly leapfrogged in where we're at from a Molina standpoint. In fact, what we did, one of the first things we actually did is shift most of our infrastructure into the cloud. And secondly, we've been focused on our customer experience, really focusing on, I mentioned earlier on, around our Medicaid membership that we support. And we've actually really drove a huge customer transformation effort. It's still in its infancy, I would say, but many years to come on it. But we certainly have spent a lot of effort and investment specifically in that area. I'd also would add that we've done some significant improvements in our cybersecurity infrastructure.
I would say that unlike, I don't know, probably the last 20 years, I have seen IT lean in and be a lead, unlike the previous 20 years. It's been amazing. And so from a digital perspective, I would say that there's probably 4 things that I've seen IT lead in terms of the digital transformation on. One would be Agile. So Agile is no longer kind of a nice to have. It's really embedded in the business and IT. I would say cloud, so the ability to spin up things and to variabilize things has been instrumental in speed and creativity. Data democratization, the ability to find data and serve it up to our business clients such that they can use it to drive value and then continue to focus our investments and our prioritization. And last but not least would be productization. The ability to really think kind of cradle to grave and vertically, IT has been leading on and has been helping the business understand the value of that and integrating those two things to deliver business outcomes. So I would say those are probably the 4 areas that I've seen IT really lead differently than I saw the previous couple of generations, and it's been extraordinary.
Yeah, I think we're 3 out of 4 as far as that goes, but maybe that's because we're higher ed, I'm not sure, right? But I would say this, the pandemic really provided an opportunity for IT to shine. If you look at something like UCLA, which the academic mission is entirely based on an in-person experience, right? To be able to pivot that and be able to continue to educate students via digital means, via Zoom, even Teams as a backup, right? was a big step forward for us academically and as an institution, right? In terms of agile, we're trying to use that more as a verb than maybe a noun at this point, but really getting the culture to change, to think about doing things a little less traditionally than we used to. And again, it's higher education. The culture is such that it really doesn't want to change, right? The cloud, when I got to UCLA Anderson, we didn't have a defined cloud strategy, right? So being able to actually kick the tires and run some use cases on pilots with both AWS and Azure has been very powerful. And everything we're doing now is about data. So clearly along those lines, I would agree 100%. Those are all things that we're doing now. And pushing the narrative forward and getting our employees to embrace it, both from an IT side and from the business side as well.
You both talked about data and data a lot there. So as you've looked at data, the move to cloud, access to data, data and analytics, how have you seen this actually impact maybe the businesses and to add additional value to the organizations?
I mean, I can take this right now. I'm in an engagement with Avasant right now, strategic consulting, to help us do that, right? And we think of these projects maybe technology first, right? And we know where the data is. But we were stuck on what the business outcomes were. So we really had to tap that stakeholder community. And they've been so engaged in this project. It's really fascinating for me. And we would plan an hour, and it would be an hour and a half, because we could just keep going on and on about personas and the journey of the student and the customer experience from that perspective. And I've just been so delighted how the business has bought into what we're doing and wants to be there with us so that we can make it better for everyone.
We've established a data governance new function, really focused on understanding who owns the data, the nomenclature, et cetera. So we've done an extensive job of creating and partnering up with our business to really put together data governance in place. And then we're moving to our second generation of our data lake, primarily shifting most of that into the cloud at scale. And we've also gone through and removed a lot of redundant databases. We get into real tactical discussion here, but we've done a lot of investments in sort of tying data governance back to how do we create a source of truth, identify this source of truth, and really eliminating a lot of our redundancy.
And I would just say that we're trying to move data to the edge, right? So picking up the data, from an IoT or at the edge, anything from, so in my industry, it's, with COVID, it was a lot of wait time. So it was a lot of access information, right? So we've done a lot of use cases around, now that people are coming back into certain care facilities, why are we seeing backups in the ER and the OR and the primary care facilities as well as the tertiary care facilities? And so just to be able to capture that data and analyze it from multiple perspectives, we're creating use cases that we had never created before. And so it's really been fascinating to utilize the data that way.
Okay. So now that we're hopefully continuing to come out of COVID, and a lot of learnings occurred, and through automation, emergency things that had to get done, we had to react very quickly when a lot of the shutdowns, limited labor and everything else. So Gary, what would you say some of the key learnings were and some of the activities that you did maybe to survive, if you will, during COVID?
I think in our case, it wasn't necessarily a matter of survival. We actually increased at a pace that's simply unbelievable. We actually were an acquisition binge, I would call it. We've done a significant number of acquisitions over the last 4 years, really to increase our membership and primarily to address a lot of the state healthcare issues and when we're responding to RFPs. So we did not slow down. And in fact, of course, our businesses and our employees began to understand and depend upon IT. And when they saw the capability that we invented in the space of weeks to really move work to the home. We actually did that at scale. It was, I think, our businesses got a lot better appreciation of what IT can do for them to enable them to work remotely at home. And now, of course, all of you know this is just a fact of life now today, is the way we're actually going to be operating. But I'll tell you this, we did not slow down. I wish maybe we should have, but no. It's been moving at least in our organization, at a speed that's unrelentless, and we actually have to depend upon our partners so we can flex capability. In fact, our challenge actually has become around employees. How do we get access to talent? Has been a big issue. How do we bring up a call center in a remote location in a space of 30 days? Or how do I ensure that an acquisition gets done in the time period we need to get done, typically in 6 months? How do we leverage our key capability platforms to enable that so that we can not acquire assets that we don't want to be supporting and maintaining?
So are you seeing that, are the businesses seeing that as true additional value outside of just a cost center work?
Absolutely. We had just got off of a leadership offsite with our ELT members, and the two things that our CEO put on the board was technology. We're pretty much saying we've got technology house in order, so to speak. Now we need to grow. How do we use that to continue to grow? I would say we have still a lot more work to be done to really expand that out.
Jill, what are you seeing on the automation and the learnings across your client base?
You know, I'm going to cover something that might be a little interesting. One of the key learnings that we had, and we stumbled upon it a bit, is less about the technical and more about the people. And so one of the key learnings was employee engagement. And I don't mean, what I mean specifically is the IT team and how they work with the business team. Understanding, being able to finally demonstrate the value that they produce was huge. And to be able to measure that had a tremendous advantage to the employee morale and to retention. So now we're looking at ways to how do we measure the engagement to some of the shortages of key talent that Gary had mentioned. And we were a bit surprised that had such an impact, and for people to be able to see the impact that they've had was tremendous. So I would just offer that one of our observations and learnings was that measuring the employee experience, particularly on our teams, is huge. And being able to share with them what they were able to contribute did a lot in terms of their morale and again, the retention and the career progression that people have while we're going through transformations.
Howard,
I'm going to kind of split this a couple of different ways. So I think on the IT employee side, I would say this. We've lost some people. We've hired some people. I think my biggest concern is that the team stepped up, and they've just been on full on for the last couple of years. And this is still higher ed. It's not the corporate sector. It's not a Fortune 100 company. The culture is different. And I'm actually really concerned about people being that close to the edge, and not the edge, but just the edge of burnout at this point, just because they've been on for so long. So we have to pay attention to that. I want to be in tune with that, but by the same token, I think they've really embraced the pace and the change in that all that we're offering to move things forward. You'd asked a question about something specific during COVID, and we don't do a lot of custom development anymore. I'm more of a, I'd rather buy than build. But we had a situation where we were still holding classes in person during COVID, and we needed to get people safely into the building, and we were ahead of the university, both in terms of actually having in-person classes and needing such a solution so that we could do this. So we have Microsoft Power Apps. We don't do a lot of low-code development, but we actually found, because there wasn't really enough time nor a solution available publicly to develop a solution, that we actually spun up a solution in about 3 weeks, and it was a huge hit. And the business totally appreciated it, and it was both a success from an IT perspective, but if you look at getting people into the building and not during COVID, having them queue up so close to each other and being able for them just to show that they answered 3 simple questions, the color of the screen would either show red or green. Fabulous and tremendous.
One of the things that's been occurring a lot with a lot of the changes that have occurred and moving to digital transformation that's always on mind, especially some of the recent events, is cybersecurity. So Howard, how are you seeing that? How are you guys addressing that? What's some of your key concerns, and how are you?
I think everything about cybersecurity is a concern, so I'd start there, but that was pretty easy. That was a softball. When I got to Anderson, we didn't have a large footprint in security. We sort of did that as part of every day, but I took a couple of people organizationally and reorged so that I had 2 people focusing on it day to day. And I got a bit of a financial windfall during COVID as well, because some of the monies we couldn't spend otherwise ended up in my budget. So I just lifted the footprint of everything, right? I put in software that didn't exist. I tried to retire outdated software just to get overall awareness up to where it needed to be, both from just having a foundational element of cybersecurity, in-house and preventing some of the day-to-day problems. So my biggest problem during the pandemic was phishing and spoofing, right? And I stumbled on a solution that just shut all that down in a moment. And again, the business became aware. They took notice because the noise quieted down.
Okay. Yale, Gary?
I spent a lot of time in this particular area, as you can tell from my role, and it's a space that continues to evolve every month. And I think about our platforms that we have reinvented since I've joined Molina. And I can see this continue to evolve and go on every 18 months. Every 18 months, more than likely, we'll replace a tool in our cybersecurity infrastructure. And this is really a partnership with our business. Essentially, we have to be, as a health plan, we have to be concerned about all the rules and regulations and protection of patient information. We are thinking in terms about ransomware exercises and so forth in partnership with our business. It's more education. I hold a forum on a monthly basis to educate our business partners of the issues and challenges. And of course, with the recent worldwide event, it sort of stepped out our due diligence. Gladly to say there wasn't any new things that we didn't know about. But certainly for us, this is a really big area and significant investment in time and resources and exercises that we are continuing to do at the same time. As you know, we're very much in the cloud, so we're very much concerned about our endpoints, pretty much concerned about any kind of alerts that's going on out there, and it's a constant, almost vigil in this. So I want to we're like almost like policemen. It's a new job for techs in terms of really a police force that's out there constantly watching and making sure that we're actually reacting to the alerts that's going on.
I don't have anything sexy to add on cyber, although I'm sure there is really cool stuff going on out there, which is far above my pay grade. But I will just say that our observation is that it's got to be embedded into our operations. This kind of day of like you did a security project is gone, right? And so everybody has to be thinking from the moment you design things to run them, and how we run them more efficiently and in a more automated way has got to be top of mind. As organizations, we cannot afford the continuation of the cost, right? And so we've got to be looking for ways, and there's lots of them out there, which you all do. But I would just say that we just saw an explosion of the need to operationalize security and to embed it. And one last thing I would say is the conversation with the business was important and got turned up a bit. And so they were willing to kind of see where there was some additional time, energy, and sometimes dollars, right, that was necessary to build it from the beginning in a way that could be supported on the back end in the most efficient way. And if we don't do that, those costs continue to spiral and we don't have the money left, right, to go and do some of the cool, sexy stuff that hits the papers. But.
Yeah. So, GL, as you help your clients and work with your clients moving through digital transformation, and you're trying to have conversations with them around how it can actually drive additional business value, growth within the organization, and you run into what's been a common wall of they've got a significant investment in pre-existing assets. So they've got a data center, they've got brick and mortar, they got 5,000 servers on the floor, they're only, they bought them 2 months ago. How do you handle, I think I hit a nerve here. How do you handle those conversations, and how are you working with them to really understand, the true benefit and the true value it can drive forward?
Well, that's not easy, so I won't fool you. I would say a couple of things. First of all, it's been a personal mantra of mine to begin to have this conversation early and often. And I would say that we've learned a few things. One is to engage with the CFO sooner rather than later. And that requires a couple of things. One is an education. And so we've done a lot of work with bringing in outside CFOs to talk to clients around how do you start to plan for this journey, to being asset light, and what does that look like. Shockingly, it's interesting from a CFO perspective. In the beginning, I thought, well, they would probably appreciate, a reduction in CapEx to OpEx, and oh no, they definitely don't want to do that, right? So that was a bad idea. And so this notion of helping to bring in outside perspectives from a peer level and share those stories around how those journeys were done, we found that helpful. The other thing we found helpful was in these conversations with your CFO and your finance teams, beginning that conversation early so they can start to plan and they can see 1 or 2 years ahead. If you come to a CFO in the middle of a financial year, a calendar year, and you say, we're going to just move a bunch of stuff around, that isn't working for them, right? And we just found that is a multi-year kind of strategy. So that's kind of a long-term answer, but is really important because they will stop you dead in your tracks. Even if you have the very best of ideas, the CFO will stop you, right? And for good reasons. The other thing that we learned was take advantage of the opportunities as they present themselves to you. So specifically, if organizations or your organization or your clients are going through end of life, take advantage and find a way in, right? And so that is one that we seem to be able to work well on. The second one is if you're going through a big digital transformation. So a lot of organizations are kind of thinking about this from a bifurcated perspective, and they've got their kind of legacy stuff, and they want that to stay on-prem, which is fine, or private, and then you've got all the stuff that's going to go to the cloud that is that is going through digital transformation. Look for those opportunities, because that's where you can start to kind of, I don't want to say separate, but you can demonstrate an opportunity. There's an opportunity to kind of get in. And then what was the last one? Oh, the last one I would say is we've had a couple of situations where we have done, I don't know if you want to call them proof of concepts, or you try some things, right? And without the ability to shut off all of that back-end stuff, you will constantly be faced with the fact that the asset light move from cap to ops, reduction in cost isn't there. Right? And so you have to be able to turn all of that stuff off. And I can't tell you the number of times that we've gone into clients and we do all of this work, and I ask, is somebody going to shut all this off? And I literally want to see invoices. Show me where you're no longer paying for servers, right? And it doesn't happen. And so sometimes, clients will ask partners to come in, and they should. And you can even go at risk with certain partners to say, get rid of that stuff. I don't want to be paying people for that anymore. But you need to be thinking about it from the beginning to the end, close it down on the back end. And if you can do that, you can start to create this vision of how you actually get from heavy to light. So hopefully that was helpful.
So Gary, you and I were talking right before the session. I think that you said that some of your existing servers, your strategy was to just turn them off after you moved them to cloud.
Pretty much.
Okay.
We're draconian about this. In fact, we're shutting down all our data centers. I have a data center we're going to turn off in next year. So we're going to run our entire company into the cloud. In fact, we've been doing this for 4 years. So we know a little bit how to do this. So that's our strategy. We are actually we're shifting now to more SaaS-oriented, more cloud-native applications. And essentially, we're on a mission to turn off all those applications that are out there, find a cloud alternative to it. And actually, we're getting investment from this. The CEO supports this move. We could not be able to grow at the pace that we have grown without being somewhat very cloud-centric. And so there's support to turn off or essentially decommission a lot of our legacy applications, and there's still more out there. We're continuing to do that. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of support, a lot of buy-in. Our portfolio is actually driven around some of this particular work, and in a sense, we're also replatforming. So replatforming, in a sense, replaces the legacy And it's also the same strategy that we're applying to our acquisitions. We've standardized our enterprise applications. We acquire a book of business or a company, you have to run on our platforms. And we do that with very tight precision with our partners in making sure those actually hits the dates and turn off a claim engine. We don't want another claim engine in our environment.
On that,
Yeah.
how's the business looking at that from a business value? Because that's a lot of change, that's a lot of change management. So when they look at it and you say they've got the support, are they having the business support for standardization doesn't always quite work, right? I mean, they don't always buy into it. What's the true value the business is seeing out of this that is lending their support so much?
Well, for those who have come from a peer background, you know you don't want many claim engines. You don't want more than one, right? That creates significant abrasion in our operations and processes. And of course, the way how we process our claims and do our encounters and so forth. So from a value standpoint, from and training and so forth, it's a good standard to have. Our workforce uses the same set of screens, same set of processes and workflows. And so when we do an acquisition or bring on a new book of business, it has to fall in here. Now, this is not easy. It requires a lot of work, a lot of agile processes. We look at all the stories we have to burn down to make sure that we are testing appropriately and engaging our business in that. I would, it's not easy work. It's really hard work, and some don't survive in terms of when we're doing this kind of intensive work.
Howard?
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I mean, for us, it's a little different. If we do it correctly, the change management is minimal. But for us, it's more of doing the things that make sense to do. So as I said, it's retiring technical debt. As GL said, it's when there's an opportunity to deprecate a system, to deprecate it and replace it with something that makes more sense. It's about talking to the CFO, figuring out where the money is, when the money's going to be available, what's the best way to get that into the budget. And for us, it's still more of a toe in the pool as opposed to diving in the deep end head first. It's a very measured journey. In some cases, it's not right to the cloud. It may be hyper-converged infrastructure because there's such a big jump from the way we used to do things to the way that we want to do things that we can't do that all in one big bang, or that people just aren't ready to do it, both from the IT side and the business side. So it's a very measured journey for us.
One thing I was going to add is the other thing that we learned is that the platform providers have money. And so take advantage of that money, right? And so oftentimes organizations, the challenge they have is the bubble, right? Going from today where you've got a cost to serve, right? And then there's an investment spike. And then hopefully you can get to something that is more palatable on the other end. But that duplicative spend is what kills people, right? You can't stomach that. And what I would say is do not be shy, right? Go ask your platform providers to invest in that bubble. And now, a couple of years ago, you could get a ton of money. I think the money is a little bit, dried up, but you can still get it. And so I would ask your platform providers to invest in that bubble with you. And I think you'll be surprised at how many will.
And I want to add, that's a good point, because we can't do this all by ourselves. So we have an ecosystem of platform providers as well as our partners as well that help us provide support many of these systems. So we collectively work with them to figure out the economics of how we can make this happen at scale and at speed. Yeah.
So the other thing in moving to the cloud and moving to more and more SaaS and moving to more standard applications, Gary, do you see the organization, do you still have a lot of custom apps that you've moved over, or are you moving pretty much over to, either off-the-shelf apps, and what's your direction?
Yeah, got it. We still have a lot of custom apps, but what we're doing is working with our software partners to shift those to more SaaS-oriented capability, to be more cloud-centric, more SaaS-oriented. In fact, I'm looking at all of our infrastructure tools, and if they're running on-prem, I'm going to ask the question, is there an equivalent that we can run this in the cloud, in a cloud-native way? it's a significant amount of change to shift. And so we're looking, we have a list of all the applications we have in-house and determining how do I make this cloud-centric, and even the applications we have within a cloud where we've essentially done a lift and shift. Can I make this cloud native? In fact, one of the most interesting things we're doing is shifting our entire data lake platform into much more of a cloud native platform at scale. And so we're doing that for almost all of our crown jewel applications and all our critical applications. So it's one thing within our particular environment, it's a little different than most because we're in such a growth curve, and in our businesses depending on IT to drive cost out, as well as we are driving economies of scale with common platforms and of course we do it in the cloud so that we can scale up pretty quickly and easily.
So with the change that occurs when you move you're moving from custom apps, bespoke apps to, how's the business seeing that? Because business is going to have to realign their processes. Are they seeing that the new model is actually going to be easier, higher value to the business, or is it going to be more towards just that change and that change management? What's their true realization of business value, do you think?
One of the things that we are looking at, or we have a challenge with, is the amount of sheer batch processes that we have to go through from a claims perspective. It really ties up a lot of our batch windows, for example. And so when we begin thinking of scaling, of using things like containers or data streaming, for example, we're actually shifting a lot of this to those kinds of technologies. And what we've noticed is that we've been able to reduce our batch windows significantly. So we're processing claims a significant higher number than when we did 3 months ago. And so from a business standpoint, it actually gives them some batch windows so that they can be available within the time zones they're available. We're in 19 states, and so time zones is a challenge for us in terms of the world that we live in from a payer standpoint. So they're seeing some of that value. They're seeing some of that new capability from a more UX standpoint. They're actually seeing those sets of improvements and actually enabled some of our, I would say, training and adoption and learning and how to use these systems from that standpoint, because we bring on a lot of folks that new folks are joining us, and they have to really learn how to adopt and use these systems pretty quickly. And the labor market, as some of you know, is very challenging in that particular space. So making our systems easier to use, able to perform much better, provide the batch windows for uptimes to be optimal. They're actually seeing some of the value in this, but I'm saying it's not easy. The change is difficult, especially when we want them engaged in significant amount of testing. We have to do significant amount. We have like 1,000 stories you have to get through in 3 months. How are we going to make that happen?
Okay.
So,
I think we're getting pretty close to time, but I think what I've heard, some of the key aspects are speed, standardization. The businesses are recognizing and realizing the true value that they're seeing out of digital transformation. There's a lot of hurdles that we still have to get through with the conversations, and there's a lot of selling and socializing within the organization that has to occur, is the way I kind of boil it down to based on what I think I just heard.
I think Gary made one point I just want to hop in on real quick, and it's talking about pairing sort of that on-prem or that legacy app versus what it could be. And I've heard this term come up within the last month or so of a digital twin.
Right.
And it's a very powerful term, and people are starting to talk about it, and it makes a ton of sense, right? And it's identifying what that next gen is of what you're doing today.
Absolutely. So with that, I'd like to thank the panel. Thank you for your time. And I think we're getting the hook right now. If I can see in the background there a little bit, she's inching closer and
We're
closer
not
to the
done. We
stage.
have more.
So thank you very much. And anyway, just definitely appreciate the time today. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.